I had just stepped out of the car when I saw them standing on the porch. My father and my sister. They weren't just standing there, they were waiting. Like they had rehearsed this moment. Like this was something they'd been looking forward to all day. My boots hit the gravel still dusted from Berlin. My duffel bag was slung over my shoulder, heavy with everything I hadn't unpacked yet from Checkpoint Charlie. I hadn't even made it halfway up the walkway when my father said it. "We sold your house." Just like that. No hello, no welcome home, no hug. My sister laughed first. "Oh, come on, Dad, just say it," she said, nudging him with her elbow, already grinning like she couldn't wait to watch this land. He didn't hesitate. "You're homeless now." They both laughed. Actually laughed. Right there. On the porch I paid for. In front of the house I bought with my own money after my 3rd deployment. The house I rebuilt room by room. The house I called every week to check on while I was halfway across the world. For a second everything went quiet. Not outside there were still birds whined the faint hum of a lawnmower down the street, but inside my head, like something had been cut clean through. I stopped walking. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. My sister Emily snorted like I had just asked the dumbest question in the world. "God, you really don't know, do you?" she said, folding her arms. "We sold it, like weeks ago. Try to keep up." My father leaned casually against the porch railing like this was nothing more than a conversation about the weather. "You weren't here," he added, "and your sister needed help." There it was. Of course. She always needed help. Family helps family. I had heard that line my entire life. It just never applied in both directions. I shifted the weight of my bag on my shoulder and looked at them. Really looked. My father, older than I remembered, but not softer. Still carrying that same stubborn set in his jaw. The same certainty in his eyes that whatever he decided was right. Emily perfect as always. Hair done, nails painted. Standing on a porch she didn't build laughing about a house she never paid for. And something inside me didn't break. It settled. Like dust after an explosion. They were still smiling when I did something neither of them expected. I smiled back. Slow. Steady. Enough to make both of them stop laughing. My father frowned first. "What's so funny?" he asked. I adjusted my grip on my duffel bag and took one more step forward, stopping at the bottom of the porch. "The house you sold," I said calmly. I let the words hang there for just a second. Long enough for the air to shift. "Wasn't what you thought it was." Emily's smile faltered. My father straightened. And for the first time since I walked up that driveway, they weren't laughing anymore. But before I tell you what that meant, before I explain why neither of them had any idea what they'd actually done, you need to understand how we got here. Because none of this was sudden. None of this was a mistake. And by the time I stepped onto that gravel driveway, they had already crossed a line they didn't even know existed. 3 months earlier, I was stationed in Berlin. Checkpoint. Charlie isn't what people think it is. Not anymore. It's not just history. It's still a place that hums with tension if you know how to listen. Tourists come and take pictures, but if you stand there long enough, you feel it. The weight of decisions. The echo of lines drawn between people who used to belong to each other. I liked it there. Not because it was easy, but because it made sense. Orders were clear, boundaries were clear, consequences were clear. Unlike home. My routine was simple: early mornings, long shifts, cold air that bit through your jacket no matter how layered you were. And in between just enough quiet to think, sometimes more than I wanted. I called home every week. At first it felt normal. My father would answer. Short conversations, updates about the house, about the neighborhood, about nothing important. Emily had moved back in, he said. She just needs a little time, he told me. Things didn't work out. Things never worked out for Emily. They just collapsed, and someone else cleaned it up. Usually my father. Sometimes me. I didn't question it at first. I was used to it. But after a while, things started to feel off. He sounded distracted, irritated. Like I was interrupting something. Once I heard voices in the background, not just Emily, other people. Laughter that didn't belong in my living room. "Did she send the money yet?" someone said. The line went dead 2 seconds later. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. When I called back, no answer. I told myself I was overthinking it. I told myself I didn't understand what was happening back home anymore. That's the thing about distance, it makes you doubt your instincts. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to come back, I got a message from my father. No greeting. No explanation. Just, call me before you come home. I read it 3 times. Something about it sat wrong in my chest. Like a warning I couldn't quite translate. I tried calling. Voicemail. Twice. I almost pushed harder. Almost. But duty hours got heavy that week. Long shifts, early reports. And by the time I had a moment to breathe, I convinced myself it wasn't urgent. I was coming home anyway. Whatever it was, could wait. And then it didn't. Because instead of walking into my house, dropping my bag, and finally letting myself rest, I walked into a punch I never saw coming. Sold. Gone. Laughed at. And standing there on that gravel driveway looking up at the 2 people who were supposed to be my family, I realized something I should have understood a long time ago. They didn't think they had done anything wrong. That was the part that mattered. Not the sale. Not the money. Not even the betrayal. It was the certainty. The belief that I would just take it. Like I always had. Like I always did. I shifted my weight again, letting the silence stretch just a little longer. Letting them sit in it. Because Marines don't react the way people expect. We observe. We assess. And when we move, we already know exactly what we're doing. And right then, standing at the bottom of that porch with my father staring at me and my sister waiting for me to break, I knew something they didn't. They thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea. They had just handed me everything I needed. Checkpoint, Charlie teaches you how to read silence. Not the kind people think about, the peaceful kind, but the loaded kind. The kind that sits just under the surface of a place where history didn't just happen. It pressed itself into the ground and stayed there. Berlin in the winter has a way of sharpening everything. The air cuts cleaner. The sky feels lower. Even the sounds footsteps engines' voices carry farther, like they don't have anywhere else to go. I worked long shifts there. Early mornings when the streets were still gray and half asleep. Late evenings when the tourists had cleared out and the city exhaled. There's something about standing watch in a place that used to divide the world that changes how you see things. Lines matter. Authority matters. Permission matters. And maybe that's why, without realizing it at first, I started noticing the lines at home. Didn't feel right anymore. At first it was small. Just the way my father answered the phone. Hey instead of hey kiddo. How's everything instead of asking me how I was? He used to ask every time. What was the weather like? Was I eating enough? Was I sleeping? He used to care about the details, the small things that didn't show up in headlines or medals. Now it felt like I was checking in with a landlord not calling home. Emily, of course, was suddenly always around. I'd hear her voice in the background, loud, confident, laughing like she owned the place. She's just getting back on her feet, my father would say. That line again. I'd ask what happened this time. It's complicated. It was always complicated when it came to Emily. Never simple, never her fault. One night I called later than usual. Time zones blur when you're deployed long enough. You forget what late means back home. The phone rang longer than usual. When my father finally picked up, his voice sounded off. Not just tired. Guarded. Hey, he said quickly, too quickly. Hey, I replied, did I wake you? No, he said, and I heard something shuffle like a door closing in the background. Just busy. Busy. At 10 at night. I leaned against the cold metal railing outside the barracks, watching my breath fog in the air. What's going on over there? I asked. Nothing, he said, same as always. Then muffled but clear enough. Did she send it yet? A man's voice. Not my father. Not anyone I recognized. The line went dead. Just like that. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. For a long second I didn't move. Did she send what? Who was that? I called back immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I stood there, the cold creeping through my jacket, and felt something twist low in my gut. Every instinct I'd trained for years, every gut check, every subtle signal, every moment of something isn't right lit up at once. But instinct doesn't always win against loyalty. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I didn't have the full picture. I told myself I was too far away to understand what was really happening. That's the dangerous part. Distance doesn't just separate you physically. It softens your certainty. It makes you second-guess things you would never ignore if you were standing right there. The next time I called, my father acted like nothing had happened. Conversation was normal, short, surface level. Emily even got on the phone for a minute. "Miss you, sis," she said, her voice light, almost sweet. That should have been my second warning. Emily didn't miss me. Emily missed access. "You should send some of those European chocolates back," she added with a laugh. "You know, the fancy kind." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah," I said, "maybe." After we hung up, I stayed sitting on my bunk longer than usual. The room was dim-lit only by the small desk lamp near the wall. Around me, the usual noise boots on concrete, distant voices, someone laughing down the hall, felt muted. Like I was slightly out of sync with everything. I replayed the call in my head. The voice. The question. The silence after. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened my banking app. Everything looked normal. No large withdrawals. No strange charges. No obvious red flags. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made the feeling worse. Because if something was wrong, it wasn't obvious. It was quiet. Careful. Planned. A few days later, during a rare, slow moment, I sat down in the mess hall with a cup of coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long. One of the guys from my unit, older, been in longer than me, sat across from me. "You look like you're running scenarios," he said. I glanced up. Something like that. "Work." I shook my head. "Home." He nodded once. Didn't ask more. Didn't need to. After a moment, he said, "Worst mistakes I've seen. They happen when people assume home is safe." I let that sit. Safe how I asked. He shrugged slightly. "Safe from consequences, safe from scrutiny, safe from being checked." I looked down at my coffee. Dark, bitter, still. "You ever see family do something they shouldn't?" I asked. He gave a quiet, humorless smile. "More times than I can count." "And what do you do?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a second. "You get the facts first," he said. "Not feelings, facts." That stuck with me. Facts, not feelings. That night I pulled up my property records. Not the casual overview. The detailed files. Everything tied to the house. Ownership. Loan. Legal structure. And that's when I saw it. A notification. Small. Easy to miss. Ownership activity pending review. My name was still there. But there was another entry. Incomplete. Like someone had started something, but hadn't finished it. I stared at the screen. My pulse didn't spike. It didn't race. It slowed. That's how you know something's serious. Panic is loud. Clarity is quiet. I didn't call my father. Not yet. I didn't call Emily. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I opened a new tab. County Records Office. Request forms. Documentation. If something was happening, I wasn't going to guess. I was going to know. Because whatever line had been crossed, I had a feeling it wasn't just about money. And the more I looked at that partial transfer, the more one thought kept circling in my head. They think I don't see it. They think I won't check. They think distance makes me blind. I closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the Berlin night pressed against the window, quiet and watchful. Lines matter. And someone back home had just stepped over one. If you want to understand what someone will risk, you have to understand what they're afraid to lose. For my father, it was never the house. It wasn't money. It wasn't even me. It was Emily. My sister had always been the center of his gravity. Not because she earned it. Not because she deserved it. But because she needed it. At least that's what he told himself. Growing up, the difference between us wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden. It was the kind of thing everyone saw, but no one said out loud. Emily cried. I didn't. Emily struggled. I adapted. Emily failed loudly and often. I learned to fix things before they broke. And somewhere along the way that turned into something permanent. She became the one who needed saving. I became the one who could handle anything. At first it didn't bother me. When we were kids, I even understood it. She was softer, more emotional, quick to spiral, quick to panic, the kind of person who made people step in instinctively. I was the opposite. Quiet, observant, the one teachers didn't worry about, the one who turned in assignments early, who didn't cause problems, who didn't need attention to function. And my father leaned into that difference like it was a rule. If Emily needed something, she got it. If I needed something, I figured it out. It didn't feel unfair back then. It just felt normal. After my mother died, it got worse. Not overnight, but steadily. Like a slow shift in weight you don't notice until it's already leaning too far in one direction. Emily unraveled. That's the word my father used. She's having a hard time, he'd say. She's just going through something. She needs me right now. And every time he said that, what he meant was, you don't. I was 16 when I got my first job. Not because I had to, but because I knew better than to ask. Emily was 19 when she dropped out of college. Not because she couldn't handle it, but because she didn't want to. My father called it finding herself. He paid off her tuition loans. He let her move back in. He told her she had all the time in the world. I enlisted at 21. Not as an escape, but as a decision. Structure, purpose, something earned. My father hugged me at the recruitment office like he was losing something. Emily didn't even show up. She's not good with goodbyes, he told me. I didn't say anything. I never did. That was the pattern. Emily made choices. My father absorbed the consequences, and I stayed out of the way. Over the years, the stories stayed the same. Emily got into a relationship that fell apart. She trusted the wrong guy. Emily lost a job. They didn't appreciate her. Emily racked up debt. She's just bad with money. Every problem came with a soft explanation. Every explanation came with a solution. And the solution was always my father. Until it wasn't enough. That's when the calls to me started getting different. Not direct. Not honest. Just suggestive. You're doing well, right? He'd ask. Better than your sister, anyway. I knew what that meant. You don't have as many expenses as we do here. Another hint. You've always been good with money. There it was. I sent money a few times. Not because he asked. Because I understood. Or I thought I did. Family helps family. That line again. But it never flowed both ways. Not really. Because when I needed something, real help, not money, what I got was pride. You're strong, he'd say. You'll figure it out. And I did. Every time. Which only reinforced the idea that I didn't need anything. That I was fine. That's the thing about being the reliable one. People stop checking if you're okay. They assume. They expect. And eventually, they take. I remember one conversation in particular. It was a few years before Berlin. I had just gotten back from deployment. Exhausted, burned out, running on fumes I didn't even know I still had. I called home. For once, not to check on them, but because I needed something. Not money. Not anything tangible. Just a place to land. Hey, I said when my father picked up. You home? Of course, he replied. I was thinking of coming by for a few days, I said. Just decompress a bit. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Well, he said slowly, Emily's here right now. She's going through a lot. I closed my eyes. I wouldn't be in the way, I said. It's just not a great time, he replied. Not a great time? For me. In my own house. I didn't argue. I didn't push. Yeah, I said quietly, I get it. And I hung up. That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough to cause a fight. But enough to leave a mark. From that point on, I stopped expecting. I still gave. Still called. Still showed up when I could. But I stopped assuming I had a place. Because deep down, I already knew I didn't. So when Emily moved back in again while I was in Berlin, I didn't question it. Of course she did. Of course my father let her. Of course whatever she had done, whatever mess she had created, became something he had to fix. That was the pattern. And patterns don't break on their own. They escalate. Looking back, the signs weren't subtle. They were just familiar. Too familiar to feel dangerous. Emily calling more often than usual, asking small questions. Hey, is everything okay with the house? Did you ever think about selling? Is the market good right now? Casual. Too casual. At the time, I brushed it off. Why, I asked once. Oh, no reason, she said lightly. Just curious. Curious? That word sat wrong even then. But again, distance makes you doubt. And family makes you excuse. Now standing in that driveway watching her smirk at me like she'd just won something, I saw it clearly. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. This was years in the making. Years of, she needs, you don't. She struggles. You're fine. She takes. You give. And eventually, even your place is negotiable. My father didn't sell my house because he hated me. He sold it because in his mind, I could afford to lose it. Emily couldn't afford not to gain from it. That was the math. That was the logic. That was the justification. And the worst part, he truly believed it. That's what made it dangerous. Because when someone convinces themselves they're right, there's no line they won't cross. I shifted my stance at the bottom of the porch, my boots crunching lightly against the gravel. Emily crossed her arms again, impatience creeping back into her expression. Well, she said, you gonna say something or just stand there? I looked at her, then at my father, then back at the house. My house. Or at least, the one they thought wasn't anymore. And for the first time since I got back, I felt something settle completely into place. Not anger, not grief, not even betrayal. Clarity. Because now I understood something they didn't. This wasn't about taking something from me. This was about them thinking they could. And that assumption was about to cost them more than they ever imagined. The moment I saw that partial ownership change on my screen in Berlin, something in me shifted. Not emotionally. Strategically. There's a difference. Emotion reacts. Strategy waits. And I had learned the hard way that the first move is rarely the right one, especially when you don't have all the facts. So I didn't call my father. I didn't text Emily. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I started digging. The next morning, I found a quiet corner near the administrative offices and asked one of the JAG officers if he had a few minutes. He gave me 10. That was all I needed. I didn't go into the whole story. I didn't talk about family dynamics or childhood patterns or anything emotional. I just showed him the notification. Ownership activity pending review, I said. My name is still on it, but there's another entry. He scanned the screen, his expression neutral at first. Then he asked one question. Who has your power of attorney? My father, I said. Something in his face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Not surprise. Recognition. He leaned back slightly in his chair, folded his hands together, and gave a slow nod. All right, he said, let's walk through this. No panic. No alarm. Just procedure. That's how you know something is serious. When the person trained to deal with problems doesn't react emotionally because they've seen it before. This happens more than people think, he said. Service members deploy, family steps in, lines get blurred. Blurred. That was a polite way of putting it. What kind of lines, I asked. He held my gaze for a second. The kind that turn into legal issues, he said. Then he started explaining. Power of attorney doesn't equal ownership. It allows someone to act on your behalf but within limits. Bills. Maintenance. Emergency decisions. But selling property, that's not automatic. Not with federally backed loans. Not without specific authorizations. Not without documentation. Not without you. Do you remember how you purchased the house, he asked. Yes, I said, VA loan. He nodded once. That adds another layer, he said. I felt something cold settle into place. Layer. That meant structure. That meant rules. That meant protection. What should I do, I asked. He didn't hesitate. Get the facts, he said. All of them. Don't assume anything. Don't confront anyone yet. Request full records from the county. Title changes, transaction logs, signatures, everything. Facts. Not feelings. I thanked him, stood up, and walked out of that office with something I didn't have the day before. Direction. That same afternoon, I submitted the requests. Every form. Every document. Every authorization I could think of. I didn't rush it. Didn't cut corners. Because if something was happening, I needed it documented. A week later, the file came through. I opened it on my bunk. The room was quiet except for the hum of the overhead fan and the faint sound of someone talking down the hall. I expected confusion, a misunderstanding, a mistake. What I got instead was clarity. Cold. Precise. Unmistakable. My father had signed the first authorization 2 days after our last normal phone call. The second, a week later. The third, the one that allowed the property to move forward toward sale. On the same day I had told him I missed home. I stared at the timestamps, the signatures, the names, and then I saw it. The buyer connection. Not a random buyer. Not a stranger. Someone linked. Someone familiar. Someone who specialized in quick deals. Quick! That word again. Quick means corners. Quick means pressure. Quick means someone doesn't want scrutiny. Then I saw the transfer notes. Funds dispersed. And one of the destination accounts was tied to Emily. Not directly, but close enough. Close enough that it didn't matter. I sat there for a long time. Not moving. Not reacting. Just processing. Betrayal doesn't always feel like an explosion. Sometimes it feels like something slowly freezing over inside you, layer by layer, until everything is still. That night my father called. I didn't answer. He called again. And again. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear excuses, because that's all they would be. Excuses built on the same foundation they always were. She needed it. You didn't. Instead of answering, I did something else. I started building a timeline. Every call, every message, every transaction, every signature. I cross-referenced everything. Dates, amounts, names, patterns. The more I mapped it out, the clearer it became. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't desperation in a single moment. This was a sequence, a plan. Maybe not a smart one, but a deliberate one. And the more I saw, the calmer I felt. Because calm doesn't come from control. It comes from understanding. They thought they had done something simple. Sell the house. Get the money. Fix Emily's problem. Move on. What they didn't understand was what they had actually stepped into. This wasn't just a family decision. It wasn't even just a financial one. It was legal. Federal. Documented. Traceable. And most importantly, reversible. If handled correctly. That's when the idea formed. Not revenge. Not in the loud, dramatic way people imagine. No yelling. No threats. No scene. Just exposure. Truth placed in the right hands. At the right time. With the right evidence. I didn't need to scare them. I didn't need to convince them. I didn't even need them to understand. I just needed the system to do what it was designed to do. And systems don't care about family. They care about facts. Over the next few days, I did everything quietly. No announcements. No warnings. I confirmed the loan structure. Verified the restrictions tied to VA-backed property. Reviewed what power of attorney did and did not allow. And every answer led to the same conclusion. They had gone too far. Farther than they realized. Farther than they could fix on their own. By the time my deployment ended, I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. I booked my flight home without telling anyone. No calls. No messages. No heads up. I landed early in the morning. The kind of morning where the sky is still undecided, half dark, half light. I rented a car. Drove straight from the airport to the county recorder's office. Walked in with my paperwork. Walked out with everything I needed. Complete records. Stamped. Verified. Real. And as I sat in that parking lot afterward, the engine off the silence pressing in around me, I flipped through the pages one more time. Signatures. Dates. Errors. All of it. They thought they had finished something. They thought the story was over. But they hadn't closed anything. They had opened something. And they had no idea how wide. I closed the folder slowly and rested it on the passenger seat. Then I looked out through the windshield at the quiet street ahead. People always think strength is loud, that it looks like confrontation, like anger, like fighting back. But real strength? The kind you learn when you've had everything stripped down to what matters. Looks like restraint. Looks like patience. Looks like knowing exactly when to act. And when I pulled into that driveway later that day and saw my father and Emily standing on the porch, smiling, laughing, waiting for me to break, I already knew something they didn't. They thought they had taken my home. In reality, they had just given me the one thing they couldn't control anymore. The truth. And truth, when documented, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. I let the silence stretch. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because silence makes people uncomfortable. It makes them fill the space. It makes them reveal more than they mean to. Emily shifted first. God, she always did. Well, she said, her voice sharper now. You gonna stand there all day, or are you actually gonna say something? My father crossed his arms, irritation settling into his face like he was already tired of this conversation. We already explained it, he said. The house is sold. It's done. Done. That word. People love using that word when they think they've closed something. I set my duffel bag down slowly at the edge of the walkway. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Just deliberately. The zipper brushed against the gravel with a soft dragging sound that seemed louder than it should have been. You sold it 3 weeks ago, I asked. My voice stayed level. Controlled. My father nodded. Right decision, he said. Your sister needed help. Emily tilted her head, smirking again now that I hadn't exploded. You act like we burned it down or something, she added. Relax. You'll buy another one. You always land on your feet. There it was. The assumption. That I would absorb it. Like I always had. I looked at her. Really looked this time. She wasn't worried. Not even a little. She thought this was over. That the hard part, the part where they had to make the decision, was behind them. What she didn't understand was that they hadn't even reached the beginning yet. I shifted my weight slightly and glanced past them toward the front door. It was open. And for a second I caught a glimpse of something inside that didn't belong to me. A throw blanket. Different color. Different texture. Someone else's. So, they didn't just sell it. They closed it. Fast. Too fast. That lined up. I looked back at my father. You used the power of attorney, I said. Not a question. A statement. He frowned slightly. Of course I did, he said. That's what it's for. I nodded once. Handling bills, I said. Maintenance, emergencies. He scoffed. It gave me the authority to act, he replied. You weren't here. Emily rolled her eyes. God, here we go, she muttered. You always do this. You make everything into some big deal. I didn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, I kept my focus on my father. Did you talk to an attorney, I asked. That made him pause. Just a fraction of a second. But enough. We didn't need one, he said. It was a simple sale. Simple. Another word people use when they don't understand what they're doing. Who handled it, I asked. He hesitated again. This time longer. Emily jumped in. Some guy Dad knows, she said quickly. Benson. He does this stuff all the time. It was easy. Benson. Of course it was. That name slid into place like a missing piece. I had seen it in the documents. I let out a quiet breath. Not a sigh. Just acknowledgement. Then I finally looked at Emily. Did you sign anything, I asked? She blinked. What? Any documents, I clarified. Did you sign anything connected to the sale? She frowned. Why would I, she said. It wasn't my house. There it was. The first crack. I turned back to my father. Did you, I asked? His jaw tightened. I signed what needed to be signed, he said. What needed to be signed, I repeated. I let that hang there. Let him hear it. Because words matter. Especially when they're vague. Behind them, the front door creaked slightly. And then I saw her. A woman stepped out onto the porch. Mid-30s, maybe. Soft expression, holding a mug like she wasn't sure if she should be part of this or not. She looked at me. Then at my father. Then at Emily. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. Emily straightened. Yeah, it's fine," she said quickly. "Just family stuff." Family stuff. That phrase again. I stepped forward one pace. Not enough to invade. Just enough to shift the dynamic. "You live here?" I asked the woman. She nodded slowly. "We just moved in," she said, "about a week ago." A week. So the closing had already happened. Final. Complete. At least. That's what they thought. I gave her a small, polite nod. "Congratulations," I said. She smiled faintly uncertain. "Thank you," she replied. Then I looked at my father again. His shoulders were tighter now. His posture less relaxed. Good. That meant he was starting to feel it. "Did you tell her everything I asked?" Emily scoffed. "Oh my God," she said. "What is wrong with you?" My father's voice sharpened. "Maria, that's enough," he said. "You're not going to drag other people into this." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't step closer. Didn't change my tone at all. "I'm not dragging anyone into anything," I said calmly. "You already did that." The woman's grip tightened slightly around her mug. "I'm sorry," she said, looking between us. "I don't understand what's going on." I held her gaze. And for the first time since I stepped onto that driveway, I let a little of the truth surface. Not all of it. Just enough. "When you bought this house," I said, "did you have an attorney present?" She hesitated. "No," she said. "The agent said it wasn't necessary. It was a quick sale." "Quick." Again. I nodded slowly. "Did you verify ownership directly with the county?" I asked. She shook her head. My father stepped forward. "That's enough," he snapped. "You're confusing her." I turned to him. "No," I said quietly. "You already did that." Silence. Heavy. Thick. The kind that presses in from all sides. Emily's smirk was gone now. Completely. My father's face had lost color. Just a little. But enough. And the woman. She looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath her feet might not be as solid as she thought. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. Not all of it. Just the first page. Enough to matter. Enough to change everything. I held it loosely in my hand. Not waving it. Not presenting it. Just there. Visible. Real. "This house," I said slowly, "was purchased under a VA-backed loan." The woman blinked. My father didn't move. Emily didn't speak. I continued. "That comes with restrictions," I said, "legal ones." I looked directly at my father now. "Power of attorney doesn't give you the right to sell federally backed property without specific authorization," I added. His lips parted slightly. No words came out. Not yet. I took one more breath. Steady. Controlled. And then I said the thing that finally broke through whatever confidence they had left. "This isn't just a family issue," I said. "It's a federal one." That's when it happened. The shift. The exact moment everything changed. Emily took a small step back. The woman on the porch went completely still. And my father, for the first time since I had arrived, looked at me, like he didn't understand what he was looking at anymore. Like the version of me he had always counted on. The one who would just take it. Wasn't standing in front of him. And in her place was someone else. Someone calm. Prepared. And already 10 steps ahead. People think consequences arrive like a storm. Loud, sudden, impossible to ignore. But most of the time, they don't. They arrive quietly. In paperwork. In phone calls. In people showing up at your door with calm voices and serious expressions. And once they're there, they don't leave. I didn't stay on that porch much longer. I didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been set in motion. I picked up my duffel bag, slung it back over my shoulder, and stepped away without looking back. My father called after me. "Maria, wait." I didn't. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I had spent too many years stopping when he called. This time, I kept walking. The sheriff's office hadn't changed much. Same building. Same worn floors. Same quiet hum of activity that felt steady, grounded. The kind of place where things didn't spiral. They got processed. I walked in, folder in hand. The deputy at the front desk looked up. Older man, silver hair, the kind of face that had seen enough to know when something wasn't simple. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "I need to file a report." He glanced at the folder, then back at me. "What kind of report?" I held his gaze. "Fraud," I said. That got his attention. He nodded once. "All right," he said, "let's get you with someone." Lieutenant Donnelly listened more than he spoke. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Mid-40s, calm, focused. The kind of man who didn't interrupt unless he needed to. I laid the documents out on his desk. Explained everything. The power of attorney. The timeline. The transfer. The sale. The VA loan. The lack of authorization. The involvement of Benson. I didn't embellish. Didn't dramatize. Just facts. One after another. When I finished, he leaned back slightly in his chair and let out a slow breath. "Well," he said quietly, "that's not good." "No," I agreed, "it's not." He picked up one of the documents, scanning it again. "Your father signed all of this?" he asked. "Yes." "And your sister received funds tied to the transaction?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "And the property is federally backed?" "Yes." He set the paper down, folded his hands. And for a moment he didn't say anything. Just thought. Then he looked at me. "You understand what this means?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I do," I replied. "And you want to proceed?" That one was a question. Not legal. Personal. Because once this started, it wouldn't stay contained. It wouldn't stay private. It wouldn't stay family. I held his gaze. "They made that decision already," I said. He nodded once. "All right," he said. And just like that, it began. Statements. Documentation. Verification. Phone calls. Everything moved quickly, but not chaotically. Structured. Controlled. That's how systems work when they're doing what they're supposed to do. By the time I stepped out of that building, the sun had shifted higher in the sky. It felt warmer, but not lighter. Because this wasn't relief. Not yet. This was momentum. Emily called first. Of course she did. Her name lit up my phone as I sat in the car. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. On the fourth call, I answered. "What did you do?" she demanded. No greeting. No hesitation. Just panic sharpened into anger. "I told the truth," I said. "You called the cops," she snapped. I filed a report, I corrected. "You're insane," she said. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said calmly. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is going to blow up everything," she said. "It already did," I replied. "You didn't have to do this," she insisted. "We could have worked something out." Worked something out. That phrase almost made me smile. When I asked, she paused. Just for a second. "That's not the point," she said quickly. "It is," I said, "because there was never going to be a conversation. You already made the decision." "That was Dad," she said immediately. I didn't respond. Silence again. Heavy. Then quieter, more defensive. I didn't know it was illegal. There it was. The fallback. I didn't know. I leaned my head back against the seat. Closed my eyes for a moment. "Not knowing," I said slowly, "doesn't change what you did." "You think you're so perfect," she snapped. "You think just because you wear that uniform." "This has nothing to do with my uniform," I cut in. My voice didn't rise. Didn't sharpen. But it stopped her. "This has to do with you taking something that wasn't yours," I said. "You didn't even need it," she shot back. There it was. The core of it. The truth she had built everything on. I opened my eyes. Stared straight ahead. "That doesn't make it yours," I said. She didn't answer. Because there was no answer to that. After a few seconds, she hung up. My father called that evening. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was different. Smaller. Tighter. "They came by the house," he said. "I know," I replied. "You filed a report." "I did." A long pause. "You didn't have to do that," he said. The same words. Same logic. Different voice. "I gave you every chance to tell me the truth," I said. "You didn't." "I was trying to fix something," he said. "At my expense," I replied. "She was in trouble," he said. She always is, I said. Silence again. Then quieter. I didn't think it would go this far. That was honest. I could hear it. And that made it worse. Because you didn't want to think about it, I said. I thought he stopped. Started again. I thought you'd be okay. There it was. The sentence that explained everything. Not just this. All of it. Years of it. I let that sit between us. Then I said the only thing that mattered. I said. A breath. Until you decided I didn't have to be. He didn't respond. Didn't argue. Didn't defend. Because there was nothing left to defend. After a moment he said quietly, "What happens now?" I looked out through the windshield. The sky had darkened. Streetlights flickering on one by one. Now I said we let the truth do what it does. He exhaled slowly. "You're going to ruin us," he said. I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. "No," I said. "You already did that." In the days that followed, everything moved exactly the way I expected it to. Investigations. Legal reviews. Attorneys getting involved. The sale was flagged. Questioned. Paused. Because no matter how fast you try to move something, you can't outrun documentation. And you can't override a system designed to protect against exactly this. Emily stopped calling. My father didn't. But his calls got shorter. Less certain. Because the version of control he thought he had was gone. And in its place was something neither of them knew how to deal with. Accountability. And accountability doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about intention. It only cares about what was done, and whether it can be proven. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and took a slow breath. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I understood something clearly now. This wasn't revenge. Not the kind people imagine. This was correction. This was boundary. This was consequence. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one absorbing it. The house didn't feel like mine the first time I walked back in. Not because the walls had changed. They hadn't. Not really. The same narrow hallway, the same creak in the third floorboard near the kitchen, the same faint mark on the wall where I'd once dropped a toolbox after a 16-hour shift and didn't even have the energy to pick it up right away. But there were differences. Small ones. Enough. A different set of curtains, a different couch, a faint scent of someone else's detergent in the air, traces of a life that had briefly overlapped mine without permission. The buyer, her name was Laura, stood near the doorway when I stepped inside. She looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who had invested in something real and found out it wasn't. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. I shook my head. "You didn't do anything wrong," I replied. And that was the truth. She hadn't. She had trusted the process, trusted the paperwork, trusted the people who were supposed to have the right to sell. That's what people do. They trust what looks official, what looks complete, what looks certain. And sometimes, that's exactly how things fall apart. Her attorney had already confirmed it. The sale was invalid. Not just questionable. Not just disputable. Invalid. Too many steps skipped. Too many requirements ignored. Too many signatures missing. The system had caught it. Just like it was designed to. Laura and her husband would be reimbursed. Protected. Put back where they started. Not unscathed. But not destroyed. Because that's what the law does when it works. It corrects. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't soften. It just corrects. I walked further into the living room, my boots quiet against the floor. For a moment I didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stood there. Letting it settle. Not victory. Not relief. Something else. Something quieter. "I'll give you some time," Laura said, stepping back toward the door. I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. When she left, the house felt still. Not empty. Not yet. Just paused. Like it was waiting. I moved slowly through each room. Not claiming anything. Not touching much. Just seeing. The kitchen. The hallway. The bedroom. Each space holding echoes of what had been. And traces of what had briefly replaced it. Homes remember. even when people don't. I stopped near the window in the bedroom, ran my hand lightly along the frame. And there it was. Faint. Almost worn smooth. The small ridge where I had carved my initials the day I bought the place. I hadn't thought about it in years, but it was still there. A quiet reminder. That something here had always been mine. Not because of paperwork, not because of signatures, but because I built it, earned it, lived in it. That doesn't disappear just because someone decides it should. I let my hand rest there for a second longer. Then I stepped back, because this wasn't about reclaiming space. Not entirely. It was about understanding what had been taken, and what hadn't. I saw my father again 2 days later. Not at the house. Not on the porch, but out by the driveway near his truck. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in the way people do when something they've been holding on to slips. His shoulders were lower, his voice quieter, his certainty gone. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stopped a few feet away. Kept the distance. "We are talking," I said. He nodded slowly. "I mean, really talk." There was something different in his tone. Not control. Not justification. Something closer to recognition. So I waited. He took a breath. "I didn't think it through," he said. "I know," I replied. He winced slightly. "I thought I was helping her," he continued. "I know," I said again. Another pause. "But I hurt you," he said. That one landed. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first time he said it without trying to soften it. "Yes," I said. Silence. Wind moving lightly through the trees. A car passing in the distance. Normal sounds, in a moment that didn't feel normal at all. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. I studied him for a second. The man who had raised me, who had once stood in the front row of my graduation, who had hugged me so tight before my first deployment I thought my ribs would crack, and who had also looked at everything I built and decided it was expendable. "You don't fix it all at once," I said. He nodded slowly. "You let the consequences happen," I added. His jaw tightened slightly. "Even if that means," he trailed off. "Yes," I said. "Even if that means," he looked down. Then back up. "I'm proud of you," he said. The words came out uneven. Late. But real. I didn't respond right away. Because pride doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't rewrite decisions. But it matters. In a smaller way. A quieter way. "I know," I said finally. And that was enough. For now. He nodded once. Turned. And walked back to his truck. No dramatic exit. No final speech. Just movement. Forward. Like it should have been all along. Emily didn't come. Not that day. Not the next. I heard she had retained a lawyer. That she was figuring things out. For the first time in her life. No one was stepping in front of her. No one was absorbing it. No one was fixing it. And that might have been the most important consequence of all. Weeks passed. Slowly. Deliberately. Paperwork moved. Meetings happened. Statements were finalized. And eventually, everything settled. The house remained mine. Legally. Completely. No confusion. No overlap. No question. It would take time to fully restore everything. But that was fine. Some things are meant to be rebuilt carefully, not rushed. The day I finally stood in the living room alone, truly alone, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, grounded, like something that had been pushed off balance, had finally found its center again. "I'm home," I said quietly. But the words meant something different now. Home wasn't just a place. It wasn't just walls, or a roof. It was boundary. It was clarity. It was knowing where you stand, and what you won't let anyone take from you again. Family can fail you. That's the truth no one likes to say out loud. They can misunderstand you, undervalue you, use you, and still call it love. But love without respect is just permission. And I wasn't giving that permission anymore. Not to anyone. If this story felt familiar to you, If you've ever been the one who was strong enough to carry everything, I want you to remember this. Strength doesn't mean you accept being taken from. It doesn't mean you stay silent. And it definitely doesn't mean you don't draw a line. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop being the one who absorbs the damage. If you've ever had to stand up like that alone without anyone backing you, I'd really like to hear your story. Leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this real complicated human, subscribe and stay with me. We're just getting started.